What's going on, everyone? So, when it comes to the upcoming Scream 7, we won't have Melissa Barrera as well as Jenna Ortega in the upcoming Scream film. It also makes certain plot points and stuff kind of difficult, right? And things that were set up and established that we'll never get to see, right? Like, for example, Christina Carpenter and her involvement. Sam, they kind of had trending towards the dark side. Do they ever fulfill that side of things? Even Leslie Mocker, you could argue. Now, obviously, with Stu Macher's connection to Sydney, Leslie Mocker, you could have that, but you don't have that. Like, you have the tie-in and the bridge into Sam and Tara, and just certain lines with Kirby and stuff, and her being Billy's daughter, and like, there's just so much that goes into it that they kind of handcuff themselves into Sam, particularly as a character, and now they're gonna have to explain why they aren't involved, and there's rumored explanation for it, which I think is kind of lazy, but nonetheless, right? It's one of those things where you kind of painted yourself in this corner, and I want to kind of have a fun discussion, a fun conversation, right? And of course, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. But to me, I do think that there was a bit of an argument to be made of kind of cutting out Scream 5 and 6, right? I have said, and I still stand by, again, this is just more of an exploratory conversation. It's just us talking. I do love about Scream is that the continuity, and that you can keep it going. Right? You don't have to change anything. You can always keep this bus rolling. Right? My only problem is it was frustrating, and I said this back in Scream 5. I didn't like that they tied Sam so, like, they did the daughter route, like the secret daughter and all that. Like, again, you could have, everything you did in Scream 5, you could have done without her being tied to Billy Loomis and, Christina Carpenter and all this other stuff, right? Like, you could have just had her be somebody that was tied in and connected, or, maybe connected into Billy, or maybe her mom was having, was hooking up with Billy low key or whatever. Maybe there were thoughts about her being the daughter or whatever, right? Like, but you kind of put yourself in this weird spot. Now, you could, because the big thing is, the reason that they can't do that is the Meeks Twins, right? If the Meeks Twins weren't coming back for this film, you could, right? You could, or even if you didn't, publicly state that it was, a continuation or whatever, you could kind of just pretend like 5 and 6 didn't happen, right? Like, you don't really have, you could just kind of not have mentioned, which would, again, I think a lot of people would be like, wow, they didn't even mention Sam and Tara, but I think that that's the minority of people, right? Compared to the large masses, right? Like, I do think if you didn't bring the Meeks Twins back, you could have just kind of picked up from Scream 4, right? Like, and there's a lot of things about that, right? Like, the Meeks Twins, I've talked about. The idea of them as characters, I don't mind at all. My problem is that they've done so poor with the execution of these characters, right? The storytelling, the character development, right? Like, I've talked about Mindy in particular. Like, she has no purpose. She doesn't drive the plot, right? Like, she's a worse Randy. And it's just like, you didn't need that, right? I would have rather them establish Mindy as her own character that was the bloodline of Randy Meeks. And she didn't go on these like 3-minute dialogue tangents that go nowhere and nothing happens, right? Like, again, I've talked about that on several occasions, right? But you think about kind of this, Scream. If you didn't have the Meeks Twins in this film, it would be easier to do things like the Stu Macher return, right? Because, certain things about Scream 5 and 6, right? So, for example, I've talked about the problem with Scream 7 bringing Stu back is Scream 5 and 6 established him dead. The FBI literally believes he's dead. And I've heard people be like, oh, well, maybe he's in a psych ward, or he's in a, prison, or he's whatever, witness protection or whatever. And it's like, the FBI wouldn't know any of that? Like, like, again, you have all the police forces, the FBI, all this stuff with all the resources have confirmed that he's dead. Literally, you have Kirby say that he's dead. You see on the whiteboard he is confirmed dead. But now you're going to explain why he's alive. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. But if you don't have Scream 5 and 6 in this kind of timeline, right, and you kind of pick it up from Scream 4, then you don't have any of that stuff. You're just, you just have to explain where he's been, right? No one has to really kind of ignore things or whatever outside of like, this isn't tied into Scream 5 and 6. There's also the ability, if you wanted to do a direct sequel, right? Like, which again, I personally don't want. I wouldn't have hated Scream 5 and 6 kind of being its own thing. And like, if you had something where like 1 through 4 and then 7, 8, and 9 were like the Sydney story, and then 5 and 6 were kind of like this alternative branch that was just the Sam story, I wouldn't completely hate that. I prefer the continuity, but I wouldn't completely hate that. You could argue, right? Like, I don't think I'd pick this up from 96, but could you pick this up after Scream 3? Right? So kind of Scream 7, 8, and 9 is kind of the next trilogy after 1, 2, and 3. So like 4 is kind of like its own standalone thing, which up until this point, it always kind of has been, right? I mean, if we're being honest, Scream 4 is kind of always been its own little off branch of Scream. Yeah, it has the continuity, and then obviously in Scream 6 they brought Kirby back, but it's kind of its own little standalone pocket, right? And then you have Scream 5 and 6 as kind of their own thing. So you could have done something like that, which would have made it easier to bring Stu back, because then you don't have all the history of like, where has he been? Like, this is like, hey, this is like directly after. He was locked up, he got out, now here we are type thing. You could have done something in that regard. Probably biggest thing, if you didn't include 5 and 6, is you could bring Dewey back. Now, I've said, and I still stand by, I'm okay with them killing Dewey, right? I understood it. I get it. I get why you thought it needed to be done, why they did what they did, all of it. I'm okay with that. My problem is that you did that. You said the reason that we're killing Dewey is because we want to set the tone that no one's safe, that even Sydney could even die. Don't get your hopes up, right? Like, to basically change the narrative of the franchise of like, hey, we know every Scream movie, these 3 characters are always going to live. That was the idea. And then you went and did Scream 6 and nobody died. You didn't kill anybody. So it's like, then why did you kill Dewey to go against that? Like, Dewey should still be alive then if that's the case. Right? So to me, it's one of those things that I think is a little frustrating. It's like, so you basically killed Dewey for no reason, because the only reason that you said you killed Dewey, you completely went against. So you could kind of correct that. The reason you can't do that in this film is because the Meeks Twins are alive. So the Meeks Twins are literally the only thing that kind of tie in 5 and 6 into this film. Again, I like the continuity. I prefer them to keep the continuity, but I do think it's something that's kind of interesting, right? Like, you have Sydney. You could have done this Sydney story, this Sydney arc, and just kind of told this story where, like I said, it maybe 1 through 4 are established as the, Sydney arc, and then 7, 8, and 9 are kind of the continuation of that. So you kind of have, 4, so I guess 7 would be 5, 6, and 7, right? And then again, the Sam arc would have just been that, just the Sam arc. I would have been okay with it. Anyways, always, this is a discussion, pass a question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out. It's me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.